Welcome back to the Systems of Scale podcast. I'm Ian Gatsky. Today, I'm joined by Matt Bresee, owner of Action Coach Erie. Matt has over 20 years of leadership experience across professional sports, healthcare, and corporate communications, including serving as the team president of the NBA G League's Erie Bayhawks. In this conversation, we talk about what Matt learned from professional sports about leadership under pressure, why capable business owners still get stuck, how to find the right tempo and filter for growth, and how great leaders multiply themselves through their team. Then we close with a discussion around the client execution gap and what it really takes to get people to follow through on the work in your coaching program. If you're new here, hit subscribe. It's free, and you can always change your mind. And now here is my conversation with Matt Bresee. Matt, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Ian. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. So Matt, you've led teams in professional sports, healthcare, and now you are a business coach. So you're working with all kinds of different leaders across domains, which is a pretty uncommon path, right? Professional sports being something that a very select few people get involved in, especially in a leadership position. And professional sports in particular have a very public scoreboard and real consequences when things are not working. So looking back on that chapter of your career, what did that environment of professional sports and being involved in that arena teach you about leadership and performance that still shapes how you work with business owners today?
Being a sports fan growing up, I was the kid that, what do you want to be in life when you grow up? I wanted to be professional basketball player was my main dream. By about ninth grade, I think I knew that wasn't going to quite happen, given my lack of height, my lack of ability. My jump shot was okay, but anyway, I knew that wasn't going to stick. So yeah, I was really fortunate, as you said, a little bit unique. Really fortunate to find opportunity here in my hometown, Erie, Pennsylvania. Worked both in minor league baseball, about 9 years, and then 13 years as part of the NBA G League, where I got to serve as team president. So in that particular case, I was leading a team on the business side of things, particularly talking about the basketball opportunity. What was really cool, what I learned then a lot, was the alignment between how sports really is a good teacher, but also a good analogy in life and business for what you learn. I had lots of conversations with our coaches on the court, John Treelor, Jay Larinaga, Josh Longstaff, guys that are in the NBA now. And I really valued, learning from them. They were, whether they knew it or not, they were mentors to me, because I would watch the way that they would handle things, to your point, very publicly on the court, interaction daily with the players, with their development. And what's really cool about the NBA G League in particular, it is about development. In fact, it was the NBA Development League that changed to the NBA G League while we were in it. So when you truly look at like growth and leadership, there was so much that I gleaned from that. Because on the business side, my team, we were lean and mean, as you have to do, particularly in minor league sports, and wore a lot of hats. But what I really enjoyed too was a lot of cases, a lot of the opportunities we had for my team was we'd often find people right out of college, early in their careers, right, where development was so important. For some, it was their first full-time job, and it was a tough full-time job. In sales, we've got ample sort of opportunity to make excuses or blame that our players don't have notoriety, or in Erie, Pennsylvania, in the wintertime, the weather is not the best. It was really kind of looking at all that and saying, okay, we got to control what we control. And, in talking to our head coach, it's a lot of the same things. You control what you can. You worry about your team's performance. Yes, you look at the other team and you game plan. Just like in business, you game plan for your year, your quarter. There's so many parallels. I kind of went through that career and just learned myself and grew a lot through that process. What really resonated, one, coaching, right? For the obvious, the term that people most relate when they hear the word coaching, you think about sports, right? It comes back to football, baseball, basketball, whatever your flavor is. But even beyond that, the coaches that coach music and band and art and all of that. And what really resonates is something I really have leaned into now, stepping into this space, is coaches ultimately help people achieve levels of success that they couldn't otherwise achieve on their own. So if you think back to some of the great coaches that I had, particularly, when I reflect on that, I didn't realize it or appreciate it at the time, whether it was, high school sports or whatever. But really looking back is there were a lot of times where we wouldn't have worked as hard in practice if coach hadn't pushed us. We wouldn't have shown up for those off-season workouts if coach hadn't pushed us. A lot of same parallels that relate to business now is how I can be the accountability partner for either a business owner, an executive, help push them through some challenges, help instill some belief in them that they otherwise might not have in themselves, eliminate their self-sabotage, work on mindsets, a number of different areas where I really enjoy now stepping into this coaching space in terms of business executives and the leadership space, because so much resonates with how much I really grew and learned both through sports, but also being able to work in sports and also just, leading teams.
Love it. And I feel like as you described the role of a coach, a lot of that is synonymous with the role of a great leader in like a professional business organization. What do you think the differences are between like a coach on a team versus a leader of a business organization? Is there really much? Because I think a coach, right, like they have to cast the vision of what it is that we want to accomplish together as a unit, as a group. And then they have to take responsibility of holding each individual accountable, but then also facilitate the cohesion of bringing everybody together to play as a group, as a team, right? And then, be the North Star. That's, again, just kind of banging the drum of casting the vision and holding everybody accountable, bringing the best out of everyone. Is there really much of a difference between the coach of a team versus a leader of a business?
There's not. I mean, you nailed a lot of it, right? It's that setting the vision, it's belief in the goals, communication. I mean, you name it, it all relates from, just using recent examples from, the NFL playoffs, right? The ownership that happens from the coach, right? When they walk in after the game and that post-game press conference, and even though it was maybe the quarterback that threw that late game interception, most often great coaches you hear step up and take ownership. I've got to coach better. We have to prepare our guys better. I have to put him in a better position for success. And the same is true with leadership, in business. We really, the great leaders own all of that. They own the responsibility to develop their team, their people, the direction of the organization. And then the same thing happens when success does happen. You also point to the team that made it happen, right? So deflecting, when appropriate, to say we're nothing without our people. And that's so true in sports, obviously, as well. So I think the parallels are somewhat endless when you look at the role of both coach and leader in business.
Yeah, I love what you said there about ownership, because that was one of those, granted, I'm still early in my career, but the idea of extreme ownership from Jocko Willink, like that book is one of the ones that I recommend to everyone. It's amazing. And it's just that mindset or idea of just taking extreme ownership over every outcome in your life, right? That applies to your personal life. And then also as a leader in any kind of organization, on a team or in a business, you are responsible for every outcome that happens. And then also, having the humility to give credit to others when things go well, and then when things go wrong, being there to shoulder the burden of responsibility of that outcome. When you look at the great coaches, like when you look at somebody like Curt Cignetti, like that guy is undeniably one of the greatest coaches of all time. Like that turnaround that he just executed at Indiana over the last 2 years. What do you think separates the great coaches versus the ones that maybe don't quite get the results or the outcomes, right? Like what do the great coaches do really well?
What comes to mind initially, probably the biggest things are consistency. It's the daily, the weekly, for some of these guys, it's years upon years. So many stories, again, of coaches that I really look up to and admire. The things that stick out to me are in terms of showing up daily. In basketball, we call them gym rats. They're the guys that just love being in the gym, whether that meant working out a guy, turning the lights on and opening the doors at 5 a.m., or it's watching film with somebody at 11 o'clock at night, whatever the case might be, or just being in the gym, developing guys. How that translates, that's that showing up daily, kind of doing the dirty work, the things behind the scenes, the stuff that's not in the spotlight that nobody sees. And while obviously you need players to show up and do that too, oftentimes it's the coach that's driving that, that's challenging that, to say, hey, I'm going to be there. I expect you to be there. And that consistency is not fancy. It's not going to get you the headlines. Signetti's a great example. I'm here in Pennsylvania. He coached at IUP, Indiana University of Pennsylvania. People saw him on the national stage and what he accomplished, winning the national championship at a university that had never been there before. What they didn't see is what he was doing 10 years ago, 15 years ago, showing up every day, being consistent, having a vision for him, his players. That resonates across the board in so many different areas, just the boring stuff. But it's
Yeah.
1 + 1 + 1 + 1. So what resonates to me more than anything else is consistency. And again, that applies to both discipline, showing up, sticking to your vision. If you got a dream and you don't know exactly how you're going to get there, it's the habits that you build. And obviously with habits come consistency, right? So
Right.
having good habits and just keep showing up. So I think that's probably what resonates the most. And look, I'll speak for myself, from time to time, it's easy to fall off of that, to not be as consistent, to get pulled in other directions or the shiny object that you want to chase or follow. To answer your question about what kind of separates the great ones from the maybe good ones to maybe the ones that don't stick, some of that's it, right? We're in a culture where you want success now. You want to achieve this right now. And I guess a quick aside to that, when I have the opportunity to talk to students, I got to have the title of a president of a basketball team, right? Young athletes can look at that and say, I would love to have a career working in sports. I want to do what you do or what I did. What they didn't see was at 17, the first job in sports, I was literally doing laundry and washing the floors. The second year I got promoted to be in the stadium, pressure washing the concourse and painting concession stands, opening the front gates on time.
Big promotion.
Right. So, and I share that only because, again, it kind of comes back to that just consistency of habits, showing up, putting in the work, and then all the qualities that go along with that. If you're doing the right things with the right people, treating people well, doing more than what's expected, all those little things that you're going to do along the way, that's going to lead you to the next opportunity, the next opportunity. And that can take a long time and take a lot of years. It doesn't happen overnight. So being consistent and sticking to the hard work and effort day in and day out.
You brought up consistency, and I think consistency is just one of those absolute keystone principles to the key to success. And I think as a leader, your job is one of your core responsibilities is to set the standard. It's setting the standard, set the North Star of this is our vision. This is what it's going to take for us to get there. This is our standard of excellence, of standard of how we're going to do what we're going to do in order to get to where we want to be. But as a leader, you need to embody that standard, right? And Signetti, he was asked after the Rose Bowl why he doesn't really celebrate on the sidelines. And it's because if I tell my players that I want them to play one play at a time, like I can't be showing emotion, be lighting it up on the sideline, right? So another example of how Signetti set that standard and then embodies that standard. As the leader, you have to embody that standard of consistency within your organization. You finished there talking about patience. And one of those tensions today in our modern culture is between urgency and patience, right? Business owners want results quickly. That kind of growth that they say they want usually takes time and consistency, right? So how do you help leaders find the right tempo so they can make progress without burning out or constantly feeling behind?
Yeah, great question. And I like to use, patience and persistence. Persistence can be framed another way of just saying being consistent, right? But patience and persistence has to do with expect challenges to come. And you mentioned it, having the vision, right? So you've got your vision for where you ultimately want to be. And coaching is being intentional and planning. So now as you create a plan, while you want to remain adaptable, there's always that, but kind of starting with the end in mind. The plan is the end of this year, success looks like this. How will that be defined? We like to say, write the headline for what you want it to be at the end of the year, and then work backwards off that. You have a 12-month plan. Now you want to create maybe quarterly plans, mile markers, I like to call them, so that along the way, you're checking progress, but remaining adaptable. Forcing that and being intentional with that patience and that persistence then allows you to reflect Celebrate small wins. That's another thing we talk about a lot. Sometimes in leadership, it can be a little bit lonely and you feel all the pressure all the time, but it's really important to pause and reflect, adjust and adapt, kind of along the way. But as you do that, then particularly in a case where you've got a team, making sure that you're recognizing small wins, giving yourself some grace. And I do that when I coach, particularly my even executive clients too, is to make sure that you're not just looking at the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. We've got to be able to give ourselves grace to say, we have all this on our plate. And what's happening a lot more in organizations is they're working leaner. They have fewer resources in terms of personnel. One of my clients who's an executive director that used to have another role underneath them and they haven't had it and it's not coming back. So he's in a case where he's got all this stuff on his list. And we like to say sometimes we have ideas and we put them in the parking lot. Well, a rule of thumb can be if it sits in the parking lot for certainly more than 2 months, move on, get it out of the way, because all it's doing now is just creating clutter. And having clear headspace is important. And it comes back to creating clarity. And again, all these things are kind of that domino effect of how then you can have a little bit more patience. If I'm clear on the 2, 3, 4 overriding goals that I want to be laser focused on and eliminate more of the distraction, eliminate the things that aren't ultimately going to get me to where I want to be, then I believe it allows you to have a little bit more patience because hey, I'm focused on this. And if I can at least recognize, again, back to that consistent 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, adding things each day, then I think that creates a lot of clarity to say, I'm making progress. I don't always see it. I don't always feel it. The week went by. I was really busy. Didn't always see it. But if you come back to, here's what I said I wanted to do this week, next week, this month, again, easier said than done though, because the distractions and the other things that can come up, particularly for most leaders that are wearing a lot of hats, that's where we really try to, in terms of our one-on-one coaching that we do, is on a regular basis coming back and resetting. And that accountability can really be effective over time. Our goal is any one of our clients is to just continue to help them grow, meet them where they are, so that as they grow over the next, 9 months or 12 months, the next challenge or the next plateau comes. And then how do we kind of help grow them through that?
Business planning was one of those corporate jargony terms that I had a lot of resistance to early on in my career. I was just felt like, oh, we don't need to do that. Let's just full steam ahead. Let's just go as hard as we possibly can. We kind of have an idea of the things that we need to do. We're just going to dive into it and just go day by day, right? And then finally, a few years into, so I had a marketing agency and if probably around year 2 or 3, we finally decided like, okay, going into this year, we're going to put a plan together. What happened when we finally sat down together as a team, as a leadership team, to put together that vision for the year of, okay, by the end of the year, this is what we want to accomplish. And then we thought through, okay, that's our end result that we want to get to. What is it going to take in order for us to get there? Let's reverse engineer that into, okay, breaking it down by quarters, then by weeks. When you have that plan in place, you can connect the work that you're doing today, this week, to the broader goal that you have for the year. Checking those things off, checking those boxes of getting those things done, those tasks, that work done, you can celebrate it more because you feel how it connects to the greater vision that you have or the goal that you have for the year. So I think that's a good way to be able to reinforce the patience without having that in place. You're just scattershot and then things can just pile on. You're going to say yes to everything because that's another thing. When you have that goal in place of what it is that you want to accomplish and you've planned it out, you've thought it through, it gives you a filter of what you say yes to, what you say no to. Does this help me get closer to this direction that we decided that we wanted to go, right? Does this play into our plan?
I love what you said early on to that was that you don't have to use corporate jargon, right? It can be roadmap, game plan, whatever it is, that you want to call it. So I appreciate that. It can be something that relates directly to your organization, to something that resonates, right? There's organizations that I've either been a part of, that I've gotten to know a little bit, that they're still successful. But what I hear though is that we're successful, or hey, this year, we'll likely probably grow maybe another 5 to 10%. Okay, good. But I then ask the question to say, potentially how much better could you be if,
Right.
to your point, you actually had that plan and stayed focused. And I love what you said. It's something I teach as well, is you should be putting things through a filter. Purpose, action, impact. What's the purpose of this task? What action will we take, or what's the action that we want people to take as a result of it, customers, clients, etc. And then what ultimately is the impact on our business for that, or our organization, right? So
Mm.
making sure that, again, as you get leaner staffs and priorities can seem, hey, we've got the next idea, we're chasing this or chasing that. Stay adaptable, yes. Then you might have a great idea that comes up in the middle of a quarter that you realize you want to pivot. Obviously, economic changes and other things that can affect things. So, as a general rule, more companies, more organizations will be more successful the more planning and the more intentionality they have. And you'll be more successful by, again, charting that plan, sticking to it, and not getting so distracted by each week's new shiny object.
Right. Yeah, I think it was Dwight D. Eisenhower who said, plans are nothing, but planning is everything, right? Going through that process of planning through and thinking through is absolutely critical. But once you get out into, obviously in Eisenhower's case, right, the battlefield, things are going to change, right? You need to be able to adapt. And it's the same thing in business. We use the OKR system framework for setting our goals in our business. But once we had that year-long plan, or that the game plan, I think was actually the term that we used. Okay, this is what we want to accomplish in our business this year. Then we could reverse engineer that into quarterly OKRs. Every week in our team meeting, we were reviewing where we're at in our OKRs, what key results are we making progress on this week. Like, we could tie our actions and our plans for the things that we were going to do that week as a team to that overall long-term vision, which was amazing, but absolutely critical. And now it's just an absolute standard for me. Like, if I don't have those goals in place, I just feel like I'm wasting so much effort and kind of going all over. But they do change all the time, like especially with my business now. Like, I started this less than a year ago. I have this idea of what it is that I'm going to do, but it's changing all the time. I feel like the earlier you are in your business, the less you know about what it is that you actually do and who you do it for. So those plans are going to change all of the time. How do you coach your clients through? So, okay, once they have their plan in place, how do you teach them to kind of check in with it, or monitor their progress, and then kind of adapt as needed when they're going through that journey of getting there?
Well, I think you brought up a good point, is that sometimes it depends on the maturity of the business and the organization. Are they still in growth mode? That's going to have a different effect than a company that's been around for 2 generations, let's say, or one that I'm coaching now that's third generation.
Wow.
So there's definitely an effect there, right? I would say probably the guiding principle there is you've really got to weigh what it is as you change and adapt and adjust, right? So that you mentioned Growth Club. Growth Club is Action Coach's quarterly planning workshop. Too many businesses don't do annual planning. Those that do, though, often aren't taking time to pause. And what Growth Club does is offers a day for business owner, leader, might be executive director of a nonprofit, allows them to really come and focus to work on their business for the day, get out of the office, come learn, be around others like-minded, going through similar challenges. But the focus of the day is really to come away from there with kind of a refocused for your next 90 days. What we stress is that utilizing that to really say, look at the next few months. If something comes up in that time, you then want to ask a couple of questions and say, how crucial is it that we pivot right now? And what would have to change? What else is going to have to be either removed? It's kind of the stop, start, continue exercise, a little bit of there's only so much you can add to your plate in order to make something new happen and start. What are we going to have to potentially stop in lieu of that? And if you look at that, you might
Mm.
make the case one way or the other and say, you're right, it's not worth doing that. Or let's now plan and get a runway so that next quarter, or whatever, 6 months from now, then we're ready to start that and we'll be in a better position. So depends a little bit on, again, on industry, on size of organization, how long they've been established, and certainly whatever the impact is. I mean, there's exceptions to everything, right? But if, hey, some just great opportunity comes for a company to capitalize on something now because of, something that's happened in the world, great. I mean, if you weigh the pros and cons and say this is just too good for us right now, we really see this as something we've got to attack. Fantastic, right? But those are probably more of the unique circumstances than it is the norm.
And you'll probably know when that happens. Like you'll know absolutely with full conviction. But I love what you said there about stop, start, and wait. Like I think the way that I've interpreted that and tried to put it into practice is every time I say yes to something, it means I'm saying no to like five other things, right? So if you're going to add something to your plate, it means you have to remove something. You can't get it all done. If you're going to
Mm.
add something to your plate, you have to remove something that is on your list of core priorities. So I think that's a good filter that you can use.
Yeah, and I've seen people that don't do that, and I've been in an organization that the sort of thought was just add something else, add something else. As leaders, right? Sometimes if we're not intentional or conscientious about it, we think, oh, we can just add another task and add another task. There's only so many hours in the day. There's only so many hours in the week. So what often you see is if you don't have, right, the consequence of not having that mentality of give up something to shift priorities to something else, if you don't have that mentality, it's either going to lead to burnout, it's going to lead to other tasks will just sort of suffer as a result. And it's sort of back to that, trying to be everything to everyone. You're not going to be able to be as successful. So, yeah, that's kind of where it comes back to focus, the
Yeah.
filter you put through, all of that. Because believe it or not, there's organization there and there's people out there that are trying to do that. And in the long run, it's ultimately not going to maximize your success in other areas where you potentially could be more successful.
Yeah. And I think that's the value of having somebody like yourself on the outside who can kind of look at the situation that you're in and just say, hey, you're trying to do way too much right now. This is just not going to work out, and kind of talk them through it to lead them to that realization. So I think there's a lot of value in that there. And yeah, to your point, progress requires focus, and focus means, a few things. Really, you can only focus on one real thing at a time. But obviously, as a team, there can maybe be a couple priorities, a couple focuses distributed across the team. If you say yes to everything, you're going to make progress on absolutely nothing. And I've learned that. I think maybe we all have, but I can speak from my personal experience. I've learned that. Most of the business owners that you work with are not beginners, right? You talked about one of your clients is a third generation business, which is amazing. What a story that must be. They're smart, capable, and already have been successful in many ways. And yet a lot of them still feel stuck or overwhelmed. So from what you have seen, why do capable leaders struggle to move forward and make progress? Like even if they have their annual plan in place, right? They know what they need to do, but they still struggle to move forward and make progress even when they know what needs to be done.
They get away from, again, the core things that really drive the business of the organization. Some it's well intended, it's just not the most efficient or effective way. An example would be, a leader that always wants to have their door open. Our CEO, Brad Sugars, he's the one that I heard it from first, is that's a terrible policy. And as a leader, to say that has numerous direct reports, it's not efficient for them. It's teaching kind of your team that you can come anytime with any question, any problem, any issue. It probably means that they're not doing enough critical thinking about solutions for problems or answers to questions. But as an example, I think that's a way that I've seen good leaders or seasoned or whatever still kind of plateau or be stuck because they're trying to do too much. And particularly in business ownership, we see it a lot. And because what tends to happen is that the founder of the business was wearing all the hats early on. But then as they grow, one of the hardest things for them to do is to let go of something they have been long responsible for, be it the marketing, the sales, the production. They've got to figure out what their role is. So as they grow, it's not always in black and white to say, hey, tomorrow I'm just going to shift and do this. It tends to be kind of this gradual progression of as your revenue grows, your customer base grows, your team grows, that owner has to find that they need to kind of get out of the way in some respects in order for the company to continue to grow. So the term is, let go to grow. And that's
Mm.
really hard for some people because oftentimes there's so much sweat equity in what they've built. And it's their baby. It's just everything that they've built. And it's the mentality of, I can do it better than anybody else. And that might be
Yeah.
true. So the other thing that we talk about is delegating with purpose and delegating to have an impact with that reason that you've got to be able to let go. And back to the consistency piece of it is you've got to be able to let go, but you also have to allow people to, it's not going to be to your standards right away. The next person's going to have to learn. So you've got to
Hmm.
allow them to try, feedback, adjust, try again, try, feedback, adjust again, right? Fall down, get back up, try it again, fall down, get back up, try it again, right? So it's that sort of idea that most often is that's one of the hardest things, I think, in terms of what we see with businesses is that the business owner's time tends to be one of the biggest challenges. But the good news is with a coach, with the action coach system, there's proven methodologies on how we can work with business owners to have them be less stressed, get
Yeah.
more time at home, delegate more with purpose, and manage and oversee without micromanaging. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges is that wanting, and again, sometimes it's just well-intended, wanting to be available, wanting to be a resource. Actually, I have a coaching client I just had a recent conversation with similar to this topic. And one of the things that he got from the feedback from his peers is that he's so reliable, he's consistent, he's like got a calm demeanor, he thinks things through, he tends to give really good advice. Well, guess what? Guess who everybody wants to come to bounce ideas off of? So he's got to be conscientious of how to manage that and have his own time to have his focus on his work and what's most important in his role. That's a difficult balance because you want to be respectful. There's a way it can be done in order of being intentional with your time, your calendar, protecting that time so that now instead of maybe having your door open all the time, you've got intentional meetings set with your direct reports. And there's ways that we can help manage that for those that tend to get off track.
I think that's a wonderful tactic, right? Having that time carved out, every week, every 2 weeks with your direct reports where they're, hey, instead of you just knocking on my door, coming in, that we have this time set aside every week, 2 weeks for you to be able to come to me with ideas, with questions, with help. And then that also kind of reinforces the idea of, all right, if it's 9 a.m. on Tuesday, we don't meet until Thursday afternoon, right? We've set that expectation. We have that standard. You're going to just have to try and figure it out, right? You're not going to be able to just come to me right away with this question, with this idea, right? You're going to have to chew on it, figure it out. And I think that reinforces that super well. That was something that we put into practice in our marketing agency and yielded amazing results. Also, just having that intentional time carved out with everybody on your team just allows you to obviously have that time to communicate with them one-to-one and hear their ideas, hear their plans, keep them super engaged, and also surfaces a ton of problems that I never would have been aware of because it can be hard for people to kind of bring that stuff up. But if we have this time dedicated to it and I'm kind of probing them and asking them those questions directly about like, hey, what problems are you experiencing? What ideas do you have on how we could improve this process, this thing that we're doing? I think is amazing. So I think that's a wonderful tactic that everybody should include and probably, eliminate the open door policy. Yeah, it's crazy. I feel like by nature, in any business that's early on in the process, in some capacity the owner is the bottleneck in some area of the business, right? The owner, every individual can only do so much, and in order to remove yourself as a bottleneck, it requires delegating that responsibility, delegating these things to other people, and that's super hard to do because you've gotten to this place in your business as a person because you're really good at doing the things that you do, right? Obviously, there's going to be some areas where like I know I suck at editing podcasts, right? This is going to be an easy thing for me to delegate. But when it comes to like building these GPTs, I know at some point I'm going to have to delegate that, and that's going to be hard because I know for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, I know that I'm still going to be better than whoever it is that I'm delegating this to. But it comes back to the idea of extreme ownership, right? I'm committed to this idea of delegating this responsibility, this task to somebody else. It is now up to me. It is my responsibility to do whatever I can to build that person up, to get them to the place to where they're as good, if not better than I am, right? If they are coming short, if they're falling short, not doing a thing the way that is our standard to get it done, but if they're not getting the outcome, the result that I'm expecting, it's my fault, right? Like I didn't equip them with the training necessary, the resources that they need. I didn't spend enough time with them, right? It's not on that person that they're not dumb. They're too dumb to figure it out, right? No, it's a reflection of me and my ability. It's my responsibility to get them to that place, right? But you do have to commit to that idea. And I think that just comes from an awareness. It's just like, I'm not going to be able to get to the place that I want to be if it's just me. Yeah, idea of extreme ownership plays heavily in the role and responsibility of a leader to delegate, train, build up the people around you. And I think you said that great leaders don't just manage people, right? They multiply leadership, right? They build people up to build other leaders within their organization. And that's a big shift in how most people were taught and led about the responsibility and role of leadership. So how do you help leaders move away from doing everything themselves and toward building people up who can actually carry the business forward with them?
The good segue there is right in the delegation format. There's framework there. If you find, some aspiring leader, someone you see great potential in, giving them the opportunity to take on a task. And then it comes back to being able to let go. Some of that framework then is, yes, you own that process. And again, it comes back to be consistent, but have a plan for it, right? So for example, within delegation, it becomes communicate, hey, this is the reason, Ian, why I want to pass this task off to you, right? So now you've got some understanding as to why. I'm not just, Ian, I want you to do this so I don't have to waste my time doing it. No, I want you to do this because the benefit for you, the benefit for the company, the benefit for me. It's going to free me up to work on X, Y, and Z instead. Then, as you said, the communication, we like to say, communication is measured in the response that you get, right? So that's back to, I've got to own, am I being clear in the way that I'm letting you know, Ian, how this should be done, why it should be done. And in some cases within delegation, we always like to say, give as much framework as you can, but if you can allow any level of creativity in that, Ian, here's the goal. Here's where we want you to end up. How you get there, go ahead and create your own, like find a different way to do it. Then when that's done, you've got to close the loop with, I don't want to just hang you out to dry. I want to check in with you. So Ian, I gave you this project that's due, next month. How are we doing? Right. So now it's intentional check-ins. What kind of feedback do you have for me? Again, back to that intentional time of, you got my full attention. What questions can I answer? How can I help you along that path to where I always like to say, I wanted to give people enough of a guideline, tell them a little bit of my experience, because it's important to know, my experience. Hey, when I did this before, this happened, but when I did this. However, I want you to go ahead and make it your own as much as you can, because now maybe circumstances are different. Maybe things have changed, but there's value in sharing that experience, but then still closing that loop with, okay, now we checked in with you. Well, now let's reflect together, right? Did I provide you enough information, data, structure, guidelines? What was the result? How did you do? And again, it comes back to, it may not be perfect. It might not be the way that I've done it, but by multiplying leadership, it means the only way that we're going to allow you to grow and allow the organization to get better is by delegating with purpose tasks that you then can learn to grow into, so that then we fast forward a year or 2 years, you've now mastered that. So now you're able to do that. You're able to accomplish that. So now when it comes back to kind of the example of the business owner who needs to multiply leadership as they want to see their business grow, because it can't be about one person. Almost across the board, universally, success within an organization is going to be a team of people. And being able to, again, provide structure, feedback, while, comes back to the ownership, while the leader ultimately owns the outcome. As you mentioned it, hey, I've got to make sure that I've got to communicate it well, give you enough structure, and allow enough opportunity for you to fall down, get back up multiple times if it means that, and allowing for growth to happen, because we learn through the challenges, we learn through our mistakes. And as I like to say, back to the sports analogy, there's wins and lessons. So even though it wasn't perfect, we've learned from it, and there's a lesson to be learned as a result.
Love it. I want to underline what you said there at the start, which is the quality of communication is measured in the response that you get. I had never heard that before. I think that's incredible. And another thing that I want to double click on and emphasize is, you don't want to, when you're delegating something to somebody, you don't want to just equip them with complete rigidity on, this is exactly how you're going to do this task along this way to get this outcome. Here's the outcome that you're now responsible for. I'm delegating this outcome, this responsibility to you. Here is what we have learned as like the best way to go about and complete this task or go about doing this thing. But we stole this value from Amazon It's amazing. And like one of the core values that Amazon has that we stole in our marketing agency is this idea of it's always day one, where we're going to approach every day and how we go about doing the things that we do with a fresh set of eyes every single day. As soon as it becomes day two, which is we start saying things like, oh, well, this is how we've always done it. This is the process that we have. That's when you start to go into slow decline, right? You need to be reinventing and rethinking the way that you go about doing the things in your business, those SOPs, those processes every single day. And I think that idea of, okay, equipping the person, you're responsible for this outcome. Here is how we have done it up until this point. Here's what we have found works. But feel free to go about and kind of rethink or reimagine that process to come up with something better, right? Like, don't feel like you have to be completely stuck in our ways, right? This is how we've always done it. Approach this as day one. It's amazing. I love that idea. Talking about info products, like your coaching business. One thing that I've come across with info products, right, like books, courses, coaching programs, is what I call the client execution gap. I learned this from my personal experience, right? When I buy a book, read the book, take notes, highlight, bend page corners, get the coaching program, watch all the videos, show up all the group calls, all the things, right? I consume all of the content. But you don't get any value from an info product until you actually do the work that's assigned to you in that info product, right? In that book, by that coach, in that course. So how have you personally approached the challenge of getting clients to actually follow through and do the work when you're not in the room with them?
Yeah, biggest way we can through coaching is really being that accountability partner. Whether we meet with someone, particularly our one-to-one coaching programs are the best way to do that, because we're going to meet either every other week or in some cases every week, particularly early on in a program. And that's really where a couple key things need to happen is making sure we're having one or two areas of focus. Back to the clarity, right, is important. And two is that the accountability of saying, what's the first step you're going to take towards achieving a goal, a metric? What's the next step? And then what are the consistent steps? We cover some on Growth Club, and even for the workshops, and I do retreats with groups and things like that. There's a couple things that we try to keep it simple, right? So instead of 50 slides to cover in a 2-hour workshop, we want to focus on what are really the couple of key objectives you want to take away. And then what's the commitment that you want each of them to make before they ever leave the room. And in those cases, a lot of times it's kind of up to the leader or some form of accountability within the group to make that happen. In our one-to-one coaching, and for our other workshops too, we talk about mindset, right? A lot of times it's the mindset of, why is it so hard to change? Well, the brain kind of defaults to what's comfortable, what's known. When you ask a question, like, immediately think about the difficulty for just change or doing things differently. So to your point of reading the book, attending a conference, last conference I went to, I left with pages of notes, so much great content. And I think the number that you said at the end of the conference that we were told is about 3% of what somebody hears at a conference, they actually go and put into work when they leave there. So when I left there in that particular conference, I sat down my journal on the flight home, went back through, highlighted the key things that resonated with me the most in my business that were most relevant to me right then. From that list, I kind of narrowed it down to about 5 things. And I actually went out and put on my calendar, I have a monthly check-in with me to say, am I following through on what I heard at that conference, 3 months ago? People have to find what's the right fit for them. It's a real challenge. It's a real issue, just because humans want to resort to what's comfortable, what's known, the way they've always done things. It takes a lot of intentionality, and it's back to the value of a coach or an accountability partner, people that need to keep us accountable for things that we want to say. If that's important to us, what's the plan? What's the vision? What's that first step towards that vision? And then what are the next subsequent steps? Back to maybe how we started on the consistency, the patience and persistence, but really, really being intentional about it. And I think a book is a really good example of how you can pull a lot of great stuff from it, but you're no sooner done reading it and you start your next one, and it's easy to forget about what you read last 100%. Week.
Yeah, there's so much magic in accountability in just having one individual, like a coach, who's knows the things that you're trying to do, just having somebody else there that's aware of the things that you're trying to do and is going to check in with you, ask you, hey, have you done that? Have you made progress? Just, like a personal trainer, a business coach, a community of people who are other business owners who are aware of each other's goals, who are going to hold you accountable to doing the things that you said that you're going to do. There is so much magic to that. It's impossible, like for something like AI is going to be able to replicate that and replace that. What you mentioned there about keeping it simple and keeping it focused is kind of the direction that my solution is attempting to go, where just making it as simple as possible for people to do the work that you assign to them to do, right? Like the approach that I'm taking with, my offer, the transformation engine, is to take the tasks, the things that you're assigning to your info product consumers to do, and putting it into like a step-by-step process of like, okay, we're going to walk you through exactly how to do this with generative AI, right? Like the Growth Club GPT, right? We take that task of going through and doing your Growth Club planning into a guided step-by-step process with that AI model, right? So that's kind of the idea. And that started with me doing that for books that I was reading, where I would build some of those companion GPTs for some of my favorite books that guided me through doing the exercises and doing the work. So I think it's going to be some kind of combination of companion GPTs like that break the tasks, those worksheets, the exercises that were assigned to you into guided step-by-step experiences that make it much simpler for you to do the work, thus more likely that you do it, paired with the accountability of that human-to-human relationship and that group that you're working with. The future of the info product space for sure. If you had a giant billboard that everyone in the world could see for 10 seconds, what would it say?
Win today. Probably the term that people maybe are more familiar with is win the day or win. I like just win today. Get a win today. Again, back to the small wins. Small, large, doesn't matter, but make progress. Grow today, grow a little bit more, be a little bit more than you were yesterday, learn a little bit. Whatever the case might be, or however you would define a win, whatever it is, make sure you get a win today. So hopefully that encourages people just to giving yourself some grace in that, kind of like we started about how you can accomplish something that might take years to get there, but it's going to show up in the small moments. It's the work behind the scenes. It's the less glamorous. It's all of that. And that oftentimes separates people from, either doing good to being great or, whatever level of success, that they want to achieve. So I encourage and hope everybody gets and finds that win today.
Win today. Love it. Matt, thank you so much for the time.
Ian, thanks for having me.
And that does it for my conversation with Matt Bresee. Here are my 3 biggest takeaways from the conversation. Number 1, consistency beats intensity. The best leaders and coaches win in the boring parts, showing up daily, doing the behind the scenes work, and stacking small wins and consistent momentum that compound over time. Number 2, growth needs a filter, not just effort. Planning works when it creates clarity and focus, and when you have priorities you can use as a filter for what you say yes to. Every new priority means you say no to something else, so the real skill is deciding where to focus and what to stop. Number 3, multiplying leadership is a delegation skill. Great leaders do not just hand off tasks. They communicate the why, give the right framework, create check-ins, and close the loop with feedback so other people can grow into ownership. And a bonus takeaway, Matt had a golden line in our conversation where he said the effectiveness of communication can be measured by the difference in behavior that it creates, or something along those lines. I thought that was just amazing. I'll leave the link to Matt's LinkedIn where he posts new content daily, like that little gold nugget of wisdom and everything else that we talked about in our conversation today, at the link in the description. If you want to learn more about how to close the client execution gap in your coaching program to increase the impact of your program and increase client retention, you can book a free blueprinting call with me at the link in the description. During this call, we will map out the use cases for companion GPTs within your program and set you up with all of the tools that you'll need to build them out yourself. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.